You're listening to a CNA podcast.
The Earth has a finite amount of resources. Sometimes it might not feel like that, as we endlessly extract and mine and build and power. Every year, there's an organization that counts it all up. And today, we're looking at how humanity is overshooting the mark. Hello and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board. Hello to Liling Tan. Long time no speak. We've both had holidays. How are you?
I'm great.
Any excessive resource consumption from you on a personal level?
Absolutely 100%.
That's the way.
Chocolate and cheese.
Yes.
And that's because how they roll in France. I was just there, came back recently, and I know they're so bad, but they're so good at the same time. Normally I would have a guilt trip, but not this time. Just lots of chocolate, lots of cheese. Very happy about that. Hashtag sorry, not sorry.
Absolutely acceptable.
Yeah, I did bring back some chocolate, though, for the team. It's too bad you're not here, so...
I guess too bad. Yeah, I also just got back from holiday as well, so I overly consumed on coconut curry and mud crab.
Mud crab.
In Sri Lanka. So yeah, that was nice. So good.
Yeah, so envious.
All right, let's just get right into it though. Let's not waste everybody's time for those who haven't been on a holiday, because I hate it when people do that. Let's start with weekly quiz. You've had a few weeks off from the quiz, so here we go. This one directly courtesy of a handy little quiz that is available on the Earth Overshoot website. And that's our topic for today. So I'm stealing their quiz question. Sorry, guys. But it was a good one. What is currently the biggest contributor to humanity's ecological footprint? And the ecological footprint being our collective demands on the planet. So whether that be land or energy or food, forests, fisheries, etc. A, is it the food that we eat? The cheese, the chocolate, curry? Is it B, the materials for building and infrastructure? C, CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels? Or D, food produced for animals?
I think I know this one.
That's not too hard today, but...
Well, at least I know the top two, but okay,
all right.
Let's save it for later.
Stay with us. Answer will be revealed at the end. Okay, news time. Liling, you're in the newsroom, so take us through a couple of stories.
Okay, first one, hand, foot, and mouth disease, or what's more commonly known as HFMD. Now, a recent study found that this highly contagious childhood disease seems to like warmer weather and is projected to increase by as much as 40% in some locations under a worst-case scenario. Now, researchers from Brown University, Princeton, and Johns Hopkins determined that hand, foot, and mouth disease outbreak size increases with climate change on average. Now, this disease, Jack, is not something we are unfamiliar with, right? It's widespread globally, but of particular concern here in Asia. Many parents of young children know about this. There's fever, the painful mouth sores, and the rash defined by small red dots that sometimes blister. Adults can get it too. And preschools do regular checks and send infected children home and then have to clean and disinfect the classrooms and all the toys and all the stuff. So it's actually quite a handful to deal with. Japan and China are known to see high caseloads. Here in Singapore, we had a spike as recently as May. Symptoms usually pass in a week or so, but in rare cases, there can be complications that then cause death. And understanding how it responds to climate change can help guide public health planning and adaptation.
Just another infectious disease that climate change is impacting. I feel like we talk about this quite often, the expansion of diseases to places where communities are not used to them, and also diseases becoming more severe. This is not something I've experienced. It sounds a bit like chickenpox when I was a kid.
Yeah,
but
it does.
I hear you've had a bit of a run-in with this particular.
Who's telling you these things? Who is telling you these things? Okay,
well
so a couple
known.
of months.
It's well known.
It's well known that Li Ling's had hand, foot, mouth disease. So a couple of months back, my daughter did get it from, I think she got it from some other kid during school. And she brought it home. We had to keep her at home for, I think, 5 days minimum, if I remember correctly. Okay. And in the course of those 5 days, I started seeing spots on my hands. and they were really itchy. But they were mild, and they lasted maybe 48 hours at the most. And I think it's hand, foot, mouth disease because it happened while my daughter had it.
Makes sense.
And I can't imagine what else it could have been. So, yeah, I got away lucky. My daughter's case was also mild. But yes, I don't expect it will be the last time she gets it too.
Okay,
Yeah.
what else have you got?
Cyclones. I've got cyclones.
Sure.
They're forming closer to coastlines here in Southeast Asia, intensifying more quickly and staying longer inland. And these changes to their behaviors are putting at higher risk tens of millions of people living in the region's coastal areas. So cities like Haiphong, Yangon, and Bangkok, where you are already facing threats from longer, more intense storms, could be places where things could get a little bit more dicey. Now, the studies by researchers from the Nanyang Technological University of Singapore, as well as from Rowan University and University of Pennsylvania in the U.S.
Liling, don't be telling me that cyclones are coming to Bangkok. We don't need that. I like living in a country without any cyclones, and surely you do too. No cyclones in Singapore, right?
I looked into this, and it seems it's only been hit by a cyclone once, back in 2001, Typhoon Vamay. And hey, Jack, do you know what the difference is between a typhoon, a cyclone, and a hurricane?
I think it's just location, right? Just different
It
geographies
is.
call it different things.
That's right. It's based on where they form, where they develop. They're all rotating storms, but over the North Atlantic and Central and Eastern North Pacific, they're called hurricanes. Those that form over the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean are cyclones. And in the Northwest Pacific, they're typhoons. Thank you, Nat Geo.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
Full of fun facts. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to our main story this week. Each year, an organization called the Global Footprint Network, an international research group, calculates and marks Earth Overshoot Day. You might have heard of it. In its words, that means that when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. Simpler terms, maybe, we're using up stuff on Earth. We're generating waste and we're producing emissions. This year, we used up everything the Earth can provide to us within 7 months. That's this month. August 1 was Overshoot Day. Now, for the rest of this year, figuratively, we will have to use up future resources that populations will need to survive in years to come. We're running up an ecological deficit. In an ideal scenario, there'd be no deficit. The global population would use 365 days to exhaust the planet's resources, or we wouldn't use them all up at all. That would be sustainable. So, August 1 this year, but actually we haven't been doing so well for quite a while. In fact, it was 1970 when we first overshot, and have been on basically a worse trajectory since.
Yeah, it's not looking good. And this is really like a budgeting system for us, right? What we take versus what can be generated naturally.
Exactly.
And I'm looking at a graph on the overshootday.org website on this trajectory you're talking about that began in 1971, which is the start of the third industrial revolution. And it is actually quite fascinating, Jack, to see how overshoot days just kept coming in earlier and earlier as the months went by. So in 1971, it happened in December. Then it roller coasted a bit and largely trended earlier and earlier until 2005 when it hit August. And it has consistently overshot in August since then, although the dates do fluctuate within the month. Now, this is, however, the first time it has happened on the 1st of August. So at this rate, overshoot days going to be in July next year. So it's going to get earlier by a month.
There's a lot of red on this graph. No,
Yes.
our listeners can't see this, but it's worth going to check out and just to see this sloping down of less green, more red as the years go by. No, okay, well, it's not the quiz anymore. We already did the quiz, but if you were to guess, which country do you think overshot its national footprint first? Because that's something that the network does. They calculate every single country's own national resources and compile it all together to work out the world.
Well, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that bigger countries tend to have more natural resources to replenish. So I'm going to go with a small country that has quite a dense population.
Yeah, exactly. It's all mostly smaller, wealthier countries that tend to overshoot first. So it was Qatar that overshot first this year on February 11, which is kind of wild. Small country, natural gas giant. So not only does it have limited ability to absorb or have natural resources that can help with this, it's also producing a lot of emissions. And followed by Luxembourg, strangely, on February 20, and third place was the UAE on March 4. I kind of like these charts and these statistics.
Dork.
Yeah, that's my thing. So I dug a little bit deeper to find out about how our region fares and digging through Excel spreadsheets and all that. Some not so good, others doing better. South Korea is the worst of the Asian countries. Again, a wealthy nation. Overshoot of April 4 this year. Just 2 days later, who do we have? Singapore. Small country, advanced economy. But if the global population lived and consumed in the manner that Singapore's population does, we would use up the world's resources in about half the time as present. So that's something to ponder. A lot of that comes down to the carbon footprint of consumption. So air conditioning, importing food, emissions from industry, and, as I said before, very little biocapacity to reduce that impact. Also around the region, Thailand's overshoot was August 23, so a little bit better than the mean. Indonesia's was November 24. And the Philippines, well, they don't overshoot. Yay.
Wow.
One of 60 countries where inhabitants live on a per-person basis within the one planet budget. So kudos to our Filipino friends for living within their planetary means, along with about 40% of the global population, I should say.
That's more than I thought. That's actually quite encouraging.
Yeah, if you see the way that wealthier people consume and therefore use up Earth's resources, it's stark.
It's kind of scary. Okay, so we know these are the issues. We know some of the contributing factors, some of the main contributing factors. But the organization behind this Overshoot Day, Earth Overshoot Day, Global Footprint Network, as you mentioned earlier, it also does look at what some of the solutions could be by breaking up these areas into different categories. And these categories include addressing energy, food, and also what cities can do. So obviously on the first, around energy, saying bye-bye to fossil fuels.
See ya.
That's obvious. Yep. But easier said than done, as we know. But also investing in renewable energy like solar power, wind energy, battery storage. These could be solutions to really get the transition moving. Now, food production also needs to be more efficient. Food waste needs to be curbed significantly. Ecosystems need to be conserved, restored, regenerated, and cities need to transition to sustainable transport and infrastructure. Then there's a discussion about population, but even the network admits that this is a touchy area, if not a controversial topic.
Yeah, it is. If we're talking about just having fewer humans on the planet, I think we always have this attitude of growth at all costs. So, yeah, I think they certainly admitted that it's something that should be addressed, but not many governments are willing to openly discuss that. We should note as well that there has been criticism of this kind of perhaps novel way of trying to illustrate and listify and even conceptualize this whole idea, how the entire world population uses all of the planet's resources. It's been called a publicity stunt. It's been called oversimplified. Questions have been raised about the validity and completeness of the data that's used. It's heavily reliant on data from the United Nations. And we always say it, data is king. Having more of it can only inform us better. But in developing countries in particular, it is lacking and that can skew things. But Global Footprint Network has answered a lot of these criticisms, by the way, and you can read that on their website. For me, I don't think this has to be so exact. I know the way they calculate it is down to decimal points, but it's the general idea that we can take from it, that we are barreling through our natural resources, which will make fixing these issues more difficult for future generations. So more reason to pay attention to some of those solutions that you mentioned earlier, Li-Ling, and things that we seem to talk about quite a lot.
Indeed.
Okay, quiz time. Before we go, repeating the question, what is currently the biggest contributor to humanity's ecological footprint? You probably got some clues from our discussion just now. Is it A, the food we eat, B, materials for building and infrastructure, C, CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels, or D, food for animals?
I'm going to start with C, burning fossil fuels. I think that hands down is quite the obvious one, right?
That's the obvious one. That's correct. About 61%, according to their calculations.
And then I'm going to say food, the food that we eat, not very sustainable how we produce the food. That is at number 2. 3, materials for building and infrastructure. And 4, animal feed.
Well, given that I did not do the order for the other answers,
it
I'm
was just
going
one?
to assume that you got that right.
Okay, woohoo, thanks.
No, I didn't work out the other ones.
Okay, I did a little bit of research, and I think quite disproportionately the food we eat puts a lot of strain on the planet. And we do know, of course, food for animals is also an issue, but I'm not sure how they calculate that, so I can't really go into exactly how much of that accounts for the whole food production cycle or process. And then, of course, building materials, that takes a lot of things like from deforestation, wood, and then mining and all that. So anyway, regardless of which order they're in, I think it's clear fossil fuels is a main problem and the rest are areas that need to be addressed.
That's it for Climate Conversations. Thanks for joining us. Hey, get in touch, please. We're keen to hear your ideas and your thoughts.
And like us wherever you find us. Until next time, I'm Liling Tan.
And I'm Jack Board. Thanks as always, as well to the team that put together this podcast, Tiffany Ang, Janani Jahari, Crispina Robert, and Sai Yerwin.